I'm not gonna lie, this feels like one of those moments where everything is kind of colliding at once for the Leafs, and you can just feel that something big is about to change. I'm Victor, and if you've been following this team closely, you already know this isn't just another off-season storyline. This is about the direction of the entire franchise. Because on one side, you've got the organization coming off a major shakeup after firing Brad Treliving, with reports saying even more big changes are expected and that the front office wants to fully rethink how they're using their resources moving forward. And on the other side, you're hearing insiders linking the Leafs to veteran forwards who could instantly change the top six and give this team the offensive push it's been missing. So this isn't just about one move. It's about identity, it's about urgency, and it's about whether this team is actually serious about competing again right now or if we're heading into something way more uncertain. And trust me, what's being discussed behind the scenes right now could completely reshape this roster. So stay with me, because this next part really changes how we should be looking at this team. And hey, if you're riding with the Leafs, like I am, and you want more content like this every single day, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and help us reach 1,200 subscribers. We're getting really close, and I'd love to hit that milestone with you guys. Alright, so now let's really talk about what's going on behind the scenes here, because this isn't just a simple front office move. This feels like the beginning of a full organizational shift that could define the next few years of this team. After the Leafs made the decision to fire Brad Treliving, which honestly had been building for a while given how much pressure he was under, what really stands out is not just the firing itself, but everything that came right after it. Because according to reports, the expectation inside the organization is that this is only the first of several major changes that are coming once the season officially wraps up. And when you hear that, as a fan, you immediately start thinking, okay, so this isn't a tweak, this isn't a minor adjustment, this is a full reset in how this team operates, even if they are not calling it a rebuild. Because what was also revealed is that ownership, especially Keith Pelley, made it very clear internally that the organization hasn't been using its resources the way it should, which is kind of shocking when you think about how much infrastructure this team actually has, especially on the analytics side, because we're talking about one of the biggest departments in the entire league. So when you connect those dots, it starts to feel like the Leafs are not just looking for a new GM, they are looking for a completely different way of thinking, a different philosophy, someone who can come in and actually maximize everything this team already has instead of just reshuffling pieces and hoping it works. And honestly, from a fan perspective, that's where the mixed emotions kick in. Because on one side, there's a sense of hope that maybe, finally, they are recognizing that something deeper needed to change, but on the other side, there's also that frustration, because you wonder why it took this long for the organization to admit that things weren't being used to their full potential. Another detail that caught my attention is that, up to this point, the Leafs haven't even asked permission to speak with executives from other teams, which tells me that either they are still mapping out exactly what kind of profile they want, or they are being extremely careful not to rush into another decision that could backfire. And that patience can be a good thing. But at the same time, in a market like Toronto where the pressure is constant and the expectations never drop, every day without a clear direction feels like time being wasted, especially when you already know this team is not heading to the playoffs and needs to act fast to stay competitive. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, what this news really tells us is that the Leafs are at a crossroads, because they are not tearing it down, but they are also clearly not satisfied with where they are. And that creates this very delicate situation where every decision from this point forward becomes absolutely critical. And now here's the thing that really makes this even more interesting. Because while all of this is happening internally, while the organization is trying to redefine itself and figure out who's going to lead this next phase, there are also conversations starting to emerge about potential moves on the ice. Moves that could directly impact the roster and change how this team looks next season. And trust me, when you hear the kind of names that are being linked to the Leafs right now, it really makes you wonder how aggressive this front office is about to be. And now this is where things start to get really interesting, because while the organization is clearly going through a deep internal shift and preparing for major structural changes behind the scenes, at the same time, there are already conversations happening about how to reshape this roster on the ice. And honestly, this might be the first real clue of how aggressive this next phase is going to be. According to insider Chris Johnston, the Maple Leafs are being linked to potential veteran forwards who could become available, specifically names like Pavel Zacha and Bo Horvat. And when you hear that, it immediately tells you that this team is not thinking small. They are actively looking for ways to reinforce the top six and bring more balance to an offense that has clearly been inconsistent. Because let's be real for a second. If you've been watching this team closely, you know exactly what the issue has been. The Leafs have talent, they have star power, but the depth, scoring, and consistency just haven't been there when it matters. And that becomes even more obvious when you look at players like Bobby McMann, who can contribute but is streaky. Or when you realize that guys like Nylander and Tavares need stable production around them to truly elevate this lineup. So when names like Zacha come into the conversation, you're talking about a player who brings a really balanced game, someone who can contribute offensively, play responsibly defensively, and add a level of physical presence that this team has been missing in key moments. And on top of that, his contract, while not cheap, is still manageable enough that a creative deal could realistically happen. But then you look at a name like Bo Horvat, and suddenly the conversation shifts to something much bigger, because now you're talking about a proven, consistent scorer, a guy who can give you 20 to 30 goals every season and instantly change the dynamic of your top six. But at the same time comes with a much heavier financial commitment and a longer-term risk, especially considering his age and cap hit. And that's exactly where the tension is right now, because this isn't just about adding a player. This is about choosing a direction. Are the Leafs going to take a calculated, balanced approach with a player like Zacha, or are they willing to go all in on a bigger move that could completely reshape the identity of this team? From a fan perspective, this is exciting, but it's also a little nerve-wracking, because we've seen this team try to patch holes before without truly fixing the core issues, and the last thing anyone wants is another move that looks good on paper but doesn't translate when the pressure hits. Now, when you connect this to everything we talked about earlier, the firing of Treliving, the expectation of major organizational changes, and this push to finally use all available resources properly, what it really feels like is that the Leafs are entering a decisive moment where they can't afford to get this wrong again. Because together, these two stories tell us something very clear. This team is not accepting mediocrity anymore, but at the same time, they are walking a very thin line between retooling and potentially making moves that could define the future of the franchise for years. And as a fan, you look at all of this and you feel that mix of cautious optimism and pressure, because there is still talent here, there is still a window, but if these next decisions don't hit the mark, that window could close faster than anyone expects. So when you really put everything together, what this moment represents for the Leafs is not just another off-season adjustment. It feels like a turning point where the organization is finally being forced to decide what it actually wants to be moving forward. Because on one side, you have a clear internal recognition that major changes are needed. And on the other side, you already see signs that those changes could translate into bold moves on the roster. And as a fan, that's where the emotion hits. Because there is still enough talent on this team to believe that a quick turnaround is possible, especially if the right pieces are added and the right decisions are made in the front office. But at the same time, there is no more room for hesitation, no more room for half measures, because we've seen where that leads. This is one of those moments where you either get it right and give this core a real chance to compete again, or you waste another year and start asking much bigger questions about the future of this team. And honestly, it feels like everyone inside the organization knows that the pressure right now is higher than ever. So the way I see it, this is a decisive stretch for the Maple Leafs, not just in terms of moves, but in terms of identity, because what they do next is going to define whether this team is truly ready to contend again, or if we're heading into something much more uncertain. Now, I want to hear from you, because this is where the conversation really matters. Do you think the Leafs should go aggressive and bring in a big name like Horvat, or take a more balanced approach with someone like Zacha and build depth the right way? And if you're enjoying this kind of breakdown and you want to stay on top of everything happening with the Leafs, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and help us reach 1,200 subscribers. We're getting really close, and I'd really appreciate having you here following all of this with me.